Here they are. This is really brief, but I do think there are 4 steps to change. The first is you are going to have to learn. You as leaders are going to have to build your capacity to lead a conversation around change that is grounded in a modern context of what learning looks like. And unless you do that, unless you become network learners, unless you become people who are creating and participating online, who are connecting with other people who share your passions, who are solving problems with others from around the world, not just in your local spaces, until you begin to do that, it's really going to be difficult for you to have a conversation that's relevant about how this has to look for kids. Because that's the environment my kids are going to learn in when they leave you, when they leave school. They're going to be constantly learning with strangers. In fact, here's one of my laugh lines that I always use. Everybody raise your right hand right now. I'm going to test to see how much you really want to change. Ready? Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I want to be found by strangers on the internet. Now, if that made you feel uncomfortable, you're not ready. You have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with that. If you told me that I could only learn with people in my face-to-face world, you would be now eliminating about 99% of my ability to learn. And most of the people who I learn with online are complete strangers. Now, I have the literacies to discern the good strangers from the bad strangers, so it doesn't scare me. But unless you are comfortable with that type of learning environment, with that type of interaction with people who you don't know online, how are you going to counsel your kids in that? How are you going to prepare them for that? Because there's no question most of the learning that the kids in your schools are going to do in their lives is not going to take place in their physical space, face-to-face worlds. That's the change that's happened over the last 10 years. It is absolutely going to happen in these online environments where kids are connecting around the questions that are interesting to them, more important to them, and the passions that they have. So you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to read blogs. How many of you are on Twitter and have an active Twitter account? All right, so many of you are. So I'm going to encourage all of you to start a Twitter account. If you ask people in my network, they will tell you, 95% will tell you, and I'm going to get some nodding heads here, I know it, Twitter is the #1 professional development tool that they have in their lives right now, as educators. And I see some people going like this. It is. That's because they don't follow Justin Bieber or Miley Cyrus. That's because they follow really interesting educators who are reading and sharing interesting stuff that makes them smarter, that makes them think. That's the value of Twitter. You want the secret to Twitter? There it is. Follow really smart people. Follow really, really smart people. But Twitter is the great starting point for you to understand what this kind of networked, globally connected learning environment looks like. It's not the end of it. There are blogs, there are podcasts, there are all sorts of other places that you can go to do this. But you have to start. You have to start building your capacity. So how connected are you? How much of your learning life right now takes place in your physical space versus your virtual space or your kind of technology-rich space? And I'm going to tell you again, in my case, 95% of it's over here. 95%. 5% of it happens in my physical kind of face-to-face world. And that's important learning. I'm not suggesting that that's not important. And by the way, I'm also not suggesting that kids shouldn't go to school and be with teachers. That's not what I'm saying. But we have to mix these two now. We have to connect those two in ways that we haven't done in the past. We have some great books to read. There are lots of things to do out there. Here's my really bad self-promotion moment. That's the book that I just handed out there. If you want to get your brain around it, it's really short, but you can read it in 2 hours. Second thing we need to do, once we have developed our capacity as leaders, well, then we have to begin, and as teachers, by the way, then we have to begin to educate our communities, because any conversation around change moving forward cannot be sent down from on high. You, as leaders, cannot simply make the decision, well, we're going to do this, and then just tell people this is the way that we're going. Any change conversation has to be a collaborative effort. It has to be the fruits of the discussions of not just educators, but parents and students and community members and all sorts of other people. But again, those conversations are not going to be relevant if those people sitting around the table having those conversations have not built their capacity to have them through a modern context. If they don't understand what's happening with technology and the web and learning and all those types of things, you're not going to get past the idea that 2 people down at that end of the table are clamoring for cursive writing still, while other people over here are advocating for really opening up classrooms and allowing kids to do interesting things and make stuff. It's not going to be fruitful. So you have to take the time and you educate parents. How many of you have like a regular newsletter or a regular opportunity to send parents links that are interesting and challenging the ways that we think about education? How many of you do that on a regular basis? Right, so only a few, right? We need to do that. There was an article that I read an hour ago, an op-ed piece in the New York Times today. Higher education in the United States has decided in their application process now, they are going to reduce by a large margin their emphasis on AP courses, which is a huge thing in the States, right? Everybody's taking AP courses. They said, it's ridiculous. It's causing kids too much stress, too much anxiety. It's a race that no one wants to be in. We are not going to count it as much at all. That's the type of article you need to send parents, because that is a huge change moment that's happening in the United States. Another one, a company here in the UK came out yesterday, a big company, one of the publishers, Penguin I think it was, and said, we are not going to require a college degree any longer in our application process. In fact, we don't even want to know if you have a college degree. That's a huge change moment in the ways that people are thinking about what an education is. And those are the types of things that we need to make sure parents are listening to, or at least hearing. So who are our stakeholders? What is our message? How do we reach them? This is all part of that education piece that's really important. One of my favorite superintendents, school leaders, is Pam Moran in Virginia, where she has her superintendent's blog where she's constantly putting out information about the school. She has her own personal blog where she's talking about her own learning, how her own learning is changing and what she's doing around that. And she has the most amazing Twitter feed. If you want to follow someone on Twitter, Pam Moran is a great place to start. She's constantly tweeting out pictures of kids doing interesting, different learning in classrooms because she's pushing that narrative. She's changing the expectation by her uses of social media and by her willingness to communicate with her constituents. Once you've done that, then you need to articulate a new vision. You need to articulate where you're going. How many of you have a mission or vision statements at your schools? How many of you can tell me what they are? None of you. You have one. Some of you are going to the web right now to look it up. I know, right? You have them, but you have no idea what they are. They're meaningless. They mean nothing. A mission and a vision statement should be your North Star. They should be the places that guide you forward in the decisions that you make. If you don't have a clear vision, how are you going to make decisions about what you buy on the vendor floor? How are you going to do that? What's the lens you're going to test those technologies through? So it is about vision, and it's about rethinking it for the modern world. So what is your mission? Mission to me is, what do you want kids to be able to do when they leave you? What is it that you want them to be able to do? You want them to be participating, literate, whatever else. And then your vision basically is, well, how do you get there? What does that look like in the classroom? What does teaching and learning look like if you're trying to get to that result with your kids? So here's Brett Jacobson from independent school outside of Atlanta, where I love this. The mission of the school is, we are a school of inquiry, innovation, and impact. And basically, that is the mission. You go into every classroom, this is what they want their kids to be able to do, to start with questions, to innovate as they try to find solutions to that, and to work on things that actually have an impact in the world, that actually change the world. That's the type of kid that they want to leave when they graduate from that school. Now they have a number of different ways of doing that, and I love this. These are their norms. Every student, every parent, every teacher, when I go in that school, I say, so what are the norms? They can tell me these norms, right like that. Every parent. We start with questions. Everything that we do begins with a question. We fail up. When we fail, we learn from it, and we share that. We share the well, we share the knowledge, we assume the best of everybody, and importantly, we have fun. Those are the norms in that school. I'm going to tell you right now, the level of engagement of kids in that school is about 99%. Very rarely is a kid not on task, not doing something that is productive. And by the way, that has nothing to do with technology. That has to do with the norms that they have established in this particular school around what their vision is for teaching and learning. And they're constantly revisiting, constantly tweaking that. Or an elementary school, a primary school outside of Melbourne, Esme Cap, one of my favorite principals, one of my favorite school leaders, one of my favorite schools that I've ever been to. And every year she gets together with her staff and they simply talk about, what do we believe about how kids learn? That's the question. Let's talk about this. What do we believe about how kids learn? And from that, they develop these principles. Or they've developed this mission, right? That this is what they want, this is the outcome that they want, and basically their vision is built on these principles, that children are active, that we learn through participation, that we learn through consciousness of thought, where we learn through the unity of emotions and intellect. This is their North Star. Everything that they do gets kind of pushed through this, and they evaluate technology, they evaluate people who they're going to hire based on that mission and that vision. The last step, and this is 5 years down the road for a lot of people, maybe 3, 4 for others, that's when you begin to actually implement change. It's no good to implement things that you're not clear about what you want to have happen. And most schools want to just start doing something. But the problem is they start doing something, but it's not coherent. It doesn't connect with other parts of the school or a larger vision. So it does, as Ian said on his slide right before me, it takes conviction, it takes courage to do this. As leaders, you need courage right now to do what's right for kids. Now, here's where to start on the doing part. What do you believe about how kids learn? Now look, I have asked this question to about 75,000 people around the world in the last 2 years. What do you believe is necessary in classrooms for kids to learn powerfully and deeply? And if I had the time, I would ask you, and I'd give you a chance to talk, but I don't have the time, but I know that pretty much this is what you would say. These are the things that you would say. In 75, with all these people that I've asked this question, almost every answer fits on this slide somewhere. That it needs to be safe, it needs to have relevance, it has to be some passion involved if kids are going to learn it powerfully and deeply. You have to have agency over it, and it's not constrained by time.